You know, one of the things that I love doing is connecting worship leaders and worship pastors to churches that are looking for somebody in that role. I get churches that'll contact me about finding, seeing if they can have me list a particular job or connect them with someone. And recently something happened that I feel compelled to just talk about just for a minute. There was a church that had an applicant fill out information, and one of the first questions on the application was, have you been divorced? And I know I'm going to really rattle some cages here, but I feel like I've got to speak in truth and in love. There's been so much debate about, is the writing in Timothy, when it says to be a husband of but one wife, is that meaning that you should not have more than one wife being married at the same time? Or does it mean that you can never have been divorced before, that you shouldn't have been divorced? I want you to understand that this is not a conversation about whether or not divorce is right or wrong. This is a conversation about the qualifications of someone being a pastor, prohibiting them from being divorced. For one thing, whenever the Bible has been clear on the word divorce before in the Bible, it has used specific words that deal with the word divorce. In this instance, when he says a husband of one wife, he's talking about being a husband of one wife. Divorce is not anywhere in the original text mentioned, so I don't understand why the Bible would not be clear on that issue. But one thing that we have to think about is this. Why would Paul give a description of being a man that's not been divorced and let that preclude you from being a pastor, but at the same time would prohibit, wouldn't list anything about being a murderer, being a liar, being a cheater, being an addictive gambler, or having those things in your past? And you say, well, you know, Jason, hang on a second, because the Bible does talk about that. It says that, you know, that you have to be basically a good man. I'd have to strongly disagree. And this is just me talking. I just turned the camera on and decided to talk. Because this is something that's really near and dear to me. If you as a church have decided that you're going to take the interpretation because, well, you feel like it probably is, meaning that you couldn't have more than one wife at a time, because at the time that this was written, that practice was very rampant, and Paul was making sure that Timothy was addressing these churches and being clear that that's not the way to do this. If you're on that sideline where you say, well, you know, it's still a good practice to have, not to have someone who's divorced, let's just keep that policy, then what you've done is that you found the one sin that God can't possibly forgive somebody of, and made that into something that would preclude them from being a part of a ministry. You never once ask anybody in an interview process if you've murdered somebody, because you don't think to ask that, or any other sin that God views as just as equal as divorce. But you assume that someone hasn't had repentance from the divorce. You don't ask the details of a divorce. It's just, if you're divorced, you're out. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on it, because I know that there's two sides of every story. But I believe if we test the spirits, that this side is already won, folks. Please stop precluding people from being worship leaders, worship pastors, and serving in your church because they've been divorced, unless you strongly decide to base it on the individual situation. If it's a situation where someone keeps doing it over and over and over, and that's how they live their life, that's one thing. But to just simply go by the word divorce and say you're done, I think that's wrong. That's my 2 cents. What's yours?